Cultivating courage or fearlessness is one of the best things that we can do to position ourselves well to have a great relationship. Because indeed, it is a requirement to be courageous, to be involved, deeply involved with another person. Sometimes people have a mistaken idea of what courage or fearlessness is. It's not the absence of fear. And sometimes people wait until they're not so afraid to take a chance to speak about the difficult topics that need to be spoken about in relationship, for instance. Real fearlessness is being committed to something that is so important to you, that has such meaning for you, that the fear is there, but that which you are committed to is even more important, and so it overrides the fear. So this is kind of a shorthand way to say it. You feel the fear and you go for it anyway. And if being close in a partnership is of great importance to you, there are likely times when you will be afraid of giving your heart, afraid perhaps of being dominated, maybe afraid of being left. If you experience these fears, it's very normal. You're awake, you're aware, because relationships can be dangerous. We have a wonderful teacher in our life named Stephen Levine, and he says relationships are the ultimate danger sport. Mm-hmm. So to look deeply into that which scares us, fills us with dread, those are the very things that we begin telling ourselves, and then after we look inside, to report out to other. To be with the fear, to experience it, to know it, to not deny it, not minimize it, not rationalize or justify or tell stories about why it's not important, but instead of leaning away from the fear and getting away from it, leaning into the fear and being with it so that we don't go at effect of it, and so that it doesn't keep us from risking, for instance, taking a chance on giving our heart, committing to another person, and talking about the difficult, hairy, thorny issues that can be upsetting.
It can seem almost counterintuitive to, as Linda says, lean into the fear. I really appreciate the metaphor of skiing, downhill skiing. And I remember when I was first learning how to ski and I was going faster and faster and feeling like I was starting to get out of control, what I would want to do, or what I would begin to do, is to lean backwards, you know, as though that was going to slow me down, or that would be safer, that would protect me. What I found was the hard way that didn't give me more control. It was the opposite. I was more out of control. And when I could lean into the slope, lean into the downhill motion, that actually felt more control. And it's the same way really with fear in general, particularly in relationships where we often don't, why should we feel so much fear? Why should there be fear in relationships? And when you love somebody, what's the problem? What do you have to be afraid of? And as it turns out, there's plenty that we have to be afraid of. Not necessarily because there's real danger in this relationship, but there's the perception that there might be danger. Danger in opening our heart, danger in being vulnerable, getting our feelings hurt, putting out what we really want and having that denied to us, being rejected, being judged. I mean, all of these things are potentially experiences that could leave us feeling hurt and injured and like we just don't even want to put ourselves in that position. But there really isn't any way that we can have the kind of relationship that is fulfilling without being willing to take risks. So the best thing I think that we can do to enhance our ability to be available to the kind of engagement that really fulfilling relationships involve is to learn how to work with our fear. Now, I'm not saying to get rid of the fear or to avoid the fear, which may be what we would want to do or what we sometimes try to do. But it's to learn how to incorporate the fear into our experience and to allow the fear to be there without feeling that we have to avoid it or deny it or get rid of it. In fact, the effort to avoid feeling something that's fearful rather than approaching it with an intention to understand it will end up amplifying the fear. We end up feeling more fearful the more we try to avoid it or deny it. So what we're talking about here is looking at how it is that we can relate to our fear rather than to relate from it. How we can understand what it is that our concern is and address that concern rather than taking ourselves out of a situation that is potentially hurtful or harmful. How can we develop the courage, the inner strength that we really need to be fearless in the sense of being able to experience the fear, but have something that's more important than avoiding it be our main motivator. And in this case, what we're talking about is the possibilities that are available in relationship.
So when we talk about working with the fear, there are a number of ways to do that. One of the most important, and which we sometimes refer to as the magic bullet, is telling the truth. Telling the truth about how much we want something and how much we fear it. How intense the desire is for many of us for partnership, and how afraid we are of being known and maybe left or controlled. How much we want to be close and have companionship on an ongoing basis, and how afraid we are of the sacrifices we might have to make to have that closeness. We are ambivalent. Sometimes it's submerged and not too close to our consciousness. So we need to make the commitment to investigate and to look, what am I really afraid of? And the magic bullet is telling the truth. Telling the truth to ourselves first, and then a trusted other, maybe it's our partner, to allow ourselves to feel the intensity of the desire that we want to be close. Committed partnership is not for everybody, but many of us really want it, and the desire is great, and we're afraid to tell the truth about how much we want it because we don't want to admit how desperately we want it for fear of not being able to have it. Once we can tell ourselves the truth about the depth of our desire and our longing for closeness, then we can start to get in touch with the other side, our ambivalence, because often there's a competing commitment underneath there. I want it, but I don't know if I want to have to pay all the prices that I would have to pay. I'm afraid that the prices would be too dear, and I want it. And if we can be looking at the two sides of, I'm afraid I might not have it, but I'm afraid if I have it, I have to give up this. We're positioned better to be able to make skillful decisions on our own behalf. Another powerful way of working with the fear is to vision our life some years from now. If we keep going in the direction that we're going, where we're apt to end up. And then looking from a different vantage point. If we take the risk, if we get involved, if we commit, if we're deeply known, if we reveal ourselves, where we're likely to end up some years down the road. And to weigh those two things and to see what facing into our fear and taking the risks and not allowing our fear to paralyze us and hold us still would cause. Last but not least is to seeing what the small incremental steps we could take so that we don't scare the living daylights out of ourselves, that we break it down to doable steps, and that we are at least moving in the direction of our deepest heart's desire so that we're not allowing fear to hobble us and inhibit us and stop us.
And this last thing that Linda mentioned, I really want to underscore, because I think so many of us make the mistake of seeing what it is that needs to be done and thinking that, well, if I can just really take a few big steps here, I can handle this whole thing. And that's a real setup, because there are reasons why we have fear. There are reasons why that's there. And if we don't respect and honor what those reasons are, and we try to just take steps that we're not really ready to take, then we can end up setting ourselves up to feel frustrated or feel like we have failed, and then we become more discouraged and less willing to do the work that's needed. So we always talk to people about taking a large number of small steps that are doable, rather than taking a small number of large steps, which can be really, frustrating and end up causing us to feel disappointed in ourselves. One of the things that we can also feel at times like that is if we feel disappointed in ourselves and we feel like we have failed in some way, then we are likely to punish ourselves with punitive thoughts and judgments about ourselves that are really cause us to feel like we're being punished by somebody else, but we're really doing it to ourselves. We haven't built up enough self-compassion and self-care to forgive ourselves when things don't go according to the way we would like them to go, whether it's in a relationship or in some other way. And our pattern, our tendency can be to be punishing rather than forgiving, accepting, and compassionate. So relationships really provide us the opportunity to develop these qualities that we can strengthen when we notice that we're in the throes of something that is not really helping us to feel like a better person, but is really leaving us feeling wounded and less willing to risk vulnerability in the future.
There are going to be many opportunities to risk in relationship. It's an ongoing process of speaking truth, even when you feel somebody might not agree with you or they might disapprove, that it may create tension. We are constantly given the choice of being authentic and real and honest, or dodging and skating around the edge instead. When we face into the challenge and we speak truth without blame and judgment, we speak the truth of our heart, we speak from our experience, not from our mind and our judgments and our opinions and criticism. But when we speak honestly, that's what builds our courage. Being able to speak truth, being willing to hear truth, being willing to speak it and being received with respect, different from agreement. By opening to show who we really are, even if we're really shaky in the knees. Risking revealing very deep parts of ourself. That's getting out there on those shaky branches. But each time we commit ourselves to being real, authentic, honest, open, and not concealing who we are or hiding behind some kind of image. We build our own self-esteem, we build our own self-confidence, we build our own courage, and we build the sturdy container that the relationship is becoming. That's forefront in our mind is the commitment to having the great, sturdy, resilient relationship, not to playing it safe, to playing the big game, the high-stakes game with the huge payoff.
The irony is that when we try to avoid and play it safe, when we try to avoid those situations where we might be vulnerable or where we might be at risk of experiencing something that we don't want to, that we actually end up intensifying the fear rather than diminishing it. And when we can step into it, and what I mean by that is when we can really acknowledge it, face it, look at what is really driving that fear. What is it exactly that we are concerned about? What is it that we're afraid could happen if we honor this commitment or this desire that we have to be authentic, to be real, to be fully present and honest with who we are in the moment? When we can really look at honestly and acknowledge to ourselves and to whoever it is that we're in relationship with what that fear is, that's the main step that we can take towards becoming fearless.